And we're live, folks, to discuss the episode called Deception, which is episode 19, season 5, and this hangout was recorded on April 15th, Saturday, 2017. Over to Jeff.
And he took like half my information, I usually say. Okay. This episode, however, originally aired April 25th of 1997, so we're not too far off from the day. Definitely same time of year. Anyway, Deception was written by Debbie Sargent, Tom Fontana, Julie Martin, and James Yoshimura, and directed by Peter Medak. And I'm going to go to the review / summary by David B226 Morris, but I will very quickly, before I do that, say that this episode contained the most played scene in the show's history because, as what we'll get to a little bit later, the thing Ben's just pulled up. Before episodes started, on TV when they first aired, they would have a thing that said previously on Homicide, and they would show scenes from previous episodes that had some effect on the episode that they were about to show. And so in one form or another, that scene got shown more than anything else ever on the show because it was shown in so many previously ons, and then there were also flashbacks to it inside the episodes. So anyway, yeah. And it makes sense because it probably had more impact on the story of the characters in the story than any other single events that occurred. But anyway, we'll get to that in a bit. So here's what Mr. Morris had to say. In the real world, drug dealers like Luther Mahoney do exist, and in real life they do get away with murder again and again and again without ever setting foot in jail. However, in the world of television, the bad guys are not allowed to perpetually triumph. We get enough depressing news in the paper and on CNN. Once in a while, the good guys have to win. That is probably why in Deception, which probably not by chance coincided with the May sweeps, the Professor Moriarty of Homicide faces justice. However, Fontana and Associates are not going to let this go smoothly, nor are there going to be no consequences. And I'm going to exit out of what he said just for a second to say that on the DVD, they discussed this about how the network told them this was dictated by the network that Luther Mahoney had to die.
Right.
They were told to kill him. But David Simon said, we're going to do that, but we're going to do it in a way that's unsatisfying in some ways because we don't want to do a cliched Hollywood thing where everything works perfectly and fits in a neat little box. So we're going to have this be something that... So they obeyed the network while also screwing with the network, which was something they perpetually tried to do. So anyway, back to this review. For 2 years, we have watched Kellerman and Lewis go after the slippery Mahoney with absolutely no success. Now an opportunity literally falls into their laps when a Nigerian drug mule dies in a third-rate motel and the condom containing Mahoney's latest shipment of heroin bursts in his stomach. The department, headed by Stivers and aided by the FBI, including a customs agent named Borders, seize upon this opportunity to put a sting on the drug dealer in a move that shows how ruthless cops can be. They substitute baking soda for the heroin and send an agent disguised as another courier with the fake shipment. 12 hours later, hell breaks loose as the dope fiends of Baltimore find that the crap they're snorting isn't anywhere near genuine. When this reaches Mahoney, he loses his cool, the cool that he has possessed in every previous encounter, and begins to blow up mainly at the lieutenant and his organization that received the heroin. Convinced that either he or the Nigerians that serve as his suppliers have double-crossed him, Mahoney arranges a daylight meeting in Druid Hill Park. Here the detectives hope to swoop up the guts of the organization. This being Homicide, it doesn't quite work out that way. Pissed beyond belief at his supposed betrayal, Mahoney kills the lieutenant he thinks is responsible, as well as a passerby who gets in the way of a bullet, and flees the scene before the cops can nab him. Enraged at how the sting goes, Meldrick grabs a squad car and chases Mahoney back to his apartment, where Luther is preparing to flee. Luther immediately surrenders, but that's not good enough for the detective, who has had to clean up after a dozen homicides related to him. He delivers a serious beatdown on Luther, but in the course of it, Mahoney gets his hands on Meldrick's gun. A few seconds later, Kellerman and Stivers burst in, telling Mahoney to surrender. In a 15-second sequence that is repeated ad infinitum, however you pronounce that, throughout season 6, Mahoney puts his gun down in apparent surrender. Kellerman tells him he has the right to remain silent, and then shoots Luther in the chest. Why did Mike, a basically good cop, commit this kind of shooting? Psychoanalysis is not part of these reviews, but it's probably a combination of frustration with Mahoney's ability to manipulate the system, combined with how Mike's own experience being investigated for bribes last year. He has come through the system one side and come out the other. Gone is the apparent righteousness that he showed earlier. Well, I mean, also, I would say that Mahoney was like laughing at him too. That you can't say that didn't that didn't play a factor in the heat of the moment. But anyway,
also just one slight interruption. You can very easily bump him off for a righteous reason.
Yeah,
That can be very much motivated as doing the right thing.
When G asks him about the shooting, he has no problem lying to his boss as to the exact circumstances of the murder. Meldrick willingly backs him up, and more reluctantly so does Stivers. Both detectives will spoilers. Meldrick will also spoilers. I'm gonna skip that part because it basically says what happens in the next year, and we're just gonna have to find that out for yourself.
Yep.
Even with all this going on, the show still has time to have a secondary story. Munch receives a call on an old case of Bolanders from a paroled gangster wannabe named Punchy De Leon, out after doing a 10-year stretch for murder. He gives the location of a man who was murdered 10 years earlier, who was supposedly buried under the parking lot at the Pimlico racetrack. Only when Munch has the lot dug up, no body is to be found. Munch then begins a search for the dead man, only to find him very much alive in a home in Baltimore. Unfortunately, he isn't alive for long. Punchy has followed Munch and tracked him down. After the lot has been repaved, Munch catches up to Punchy. The dead man killed the man Punchy just got out of prison for killing, and this was his version of payback. This case is funny and also surprisingly poignant, mostly from the restrained performance of Louis Black as Punchy. Those who recognize him from his weekly rants on The Daily Show will barely recognize the comedian who has done his time for a murder he didn't commit and now has to go back for doing a justifiable one. There is even a brief recap back to Bayless and Pendleton, who have patched up their feud and are back to working together. But the issue that separated them has resurfaced. Tim goes out to sea and care for his Uncle George. So much happens in Deception that we almost feel cheated when Mike and Meldrick are seen writing up the reports for the Mahoney shooting. All this excitement for so little. What neither of them know is that Luther will end up haunting everybody, especially Kellerman and Lewis. Maybe the executives at NBC thought that this was their kind of positive resolution to a popular character storyline. They forgot that on Homicide, nothing goes away and problems are not resolved by enough bullets. My score, 9. So that's what he says. Mr. Ben, over to you.
Interesting. I'll give it a 9 out of 10, and that's mainly because of the fact that Kellerman showing a bit of edge and bumping off Lewis. No, I mean Mahoney.
You keep calling him Lewis. The totally different guy, Ben.
Yes. Morgan was probably happy when he got bumped off as well. But
well, you know what? I can tell you without spoiling too much of what happens after this, that upon rewatching this Thursday night, Morgan made a comment to the effect of that this was cool, what happened in this episode, but then everything after that was bad. This is the moment he thinks Homicide went downhill. And I understand why he feels that way. I just don't agree with him.
What does it mean, like terminally for the rest of its run?
Well, yeah, he always says everything extreme. So, yeah, that's what he said. And even though I tried to point out moments that I know he enjoyed in the rest of the series, he still was dismissive about that. Like, yeah. And it is, because, as we link this back to the typology, is because he doesn't like the way they handled Kellerman after that. And because I can tell Morgan, does feel a certain kinship with Kellerman. And so he doesn't like what they did with the character because he feels like that Kellerman sort of let down the ESTP nation, I think, is what. but in a funny way, of course, because it's a TV show and the writers, make the characters do things. He doesn't blame the character; he blames the show for, he thinks making Kellerman do things that, they shouldn't have done and stuff like that. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, any problem with this episode? It was what happened after that. So, but yeah, I mean, objectively speaking, it's hard to say that this season, the only episode you could say that would be more exciting or more action-packed than this one would have been the hostage story right at the beginning of the season. Because other than that, there certainly wasn't anyone that involved as much, gunshots, chase sequences, beatings. We had a little bit more action than a typical homicide in this one.
What?
So that part couldn't be argued. It's just a matter of whether that action was accomplishing anything, and I think it definitely did, because everything about this episode was well paced. It wasn't, it wasn't like, oh, we're just going to throw in some car chases to have one here. Like everything, there was a purpose for everything that occurred, and it was realistic.
What did Morgan think of Lewis putting his gun away and getting into a fist fight with Mahoney?
Well, he said that's why you don't have your gun on you when you're going to beat somebody. He's like, that's why the cop, you have somebody else there and you hand him your gun. So his problem was, there was a couple of issues there, mistakes made. Lewis's, he didn't wait for his backup to get there before he did that. If they redid the scene, if he waited and, for just a couple more minutes and Stivers and Kellerman show up, then Lewis at that point might have handed Kellerman his gun and then beat him after that. But instead, he did it beforehand, so he made the mistake of doing that and allowing Luther to get the gun. Then Luther's mistake was not shooting Lewis as soon as he got the gun. But because Lewis had been sitting there lecturing him, Luther was like, I'm going to return the favor. Before I kill you, I'm going to say some stuff to you. But of course, he doesn't have time to get much of it out before the other two show up. And of course, in that split second, that's the thing, is as a police officer, what entirely makes a difference in how, what is considered part of your job and what's considered going outside of your job and outside the law, is that if Kellerman had actually done what he said he was going to do, which is as soon as he said drop it and Luther didn't drop it, if he shot him then, it would have been a justified killing according to the law. But he didn't. He waited until Luther had dropped his gun. And so that was the second in which it changed. But if he had actually acted upon what he's supposed to do, which is, when he saw Luther had the gun on Lewis, he aimed the gun at Mahoney, said drop it. He didn't immediately do so. If then Kellerman had shot him, of course, it would have been seen as justified. But instead, he waited, and that's why it isn't.
Legally, but morally it is.
Well, right. I mean, you can argue about all of the nuances in there. There's a lot of them.
Because we know what Mahoney is like. And that's what I liked about it, because I like it when the police officers do things where they go beyond the things that they should do, because then that gives them a bit more of an edge. I would have liked it if Munch had let Lewis Black's character get away with it. More discretion. I would like to see more discretion from the police officers. A little bit more corruption.
I mean, there's a couple reasons he didn't. One was it would have been pretty obvious that he did that. He had consulted with both Howard and G. They had torn up the parking lot. For him to have just been basically like nothing happened, that would have been difficult to do. But two, he didn't want to do that because he was angry at Punchy. He didn't want him to get away with it. He was angry that he'd been used. It was definitely made him look like not a very competent detective. I
would have actually written that in from where it actually said it. Ryan, I'm not going to do it. I am going to put you in because, you're making me look bad. You're going to go down because of this.
Yeah,
did
well,
it the
I
wrong
thought it was
way.
pretty heavily implied. There might have been more in the script, of course. That there's always most of the time they end up having to cut stuff for time, so we don't know what.
Oh yes, there was a talk about stuff that they put in the script. Any kind of movie reference that might be a little bit obvious there, Jeff, from Munch?
Yes, he was doing his Joe Pesci impression.
Yes. From Goodfellas. People.
Well, this is another thing.
Good
why
film.
I
That
love this episode
good
so
film.
much is that there's a lot of high drama, but there's also moments of humor. There's moments of sort of emotional type stuff. There's just really a little bit of everything packed into this episode, which is not easy to do, and still even involve most of the characters as well. We didn't have anybody who was really left out in any capacity. Everybody somehow had some kind of involvement in the episode, so they got a whole lot into one episode. So it really feels like a definitely it was their episode leading into sweeps, and kind of leaves you feeling like, how are they going to top that? Because that was pretty much a climax of an episode.
Here's something a bit random. So these are Mike Kellerman's hands underneath, and those are Lewis's hands on the back. Look at the difference there. The sun has that weird effect on me. I've got Lewis's hands. It darkens my skin, and then the pink skin of Kellerman.
Yeah, one of the little lines of humor when Lewis, he goes to Mahoney's garage, and the cop who didn't realize there was a garage entrance, and Kellerman and Stivers pull up, and he says, "Has Lewis from Homicide been here?" And he goes, "Black guy with the attitude and a hat. Yeah, that's him." So we got a succinct description of Lewis there.
Yeah, but only from his point of view, because generally he's
right.
He's not an attitude guy.
But everybody is from their point of view. That's that's what I love, is everybody has their own perspective based on what they witnessed. And I liked the directorial choice of, while Lewis is hitting Mahoney, they're showing the names on the board that Mahoney's responsible for. So there's a lot of little elements of this that I really like.
And all the audience members that recognize the names, they feel good about themselves.
Yeah. So once again, it was like a resolution, but not a resolution, because they throw in the twist of the shooting of Mahoney not being quite, quote unquote, right, as they say.
And that's the best bit about it. That's what gives it. That's what I want to see more of. A little bit of edge from the characters, and of course that has always been in the genre right from the start, when they did it in the 1930s, where they would have the rogue detectives that would do things that weren't by the book. Is something, the rogue detectives that would do things that really shouldn't do.
Yeah, and in fact, part of what I mentioned, David Simon joining the show as a writing supervisor, and as part of the staff, really sort of injected a little of that back into the show, if they had kind of lost a bit in the last couple of seasons, because when the show started, you saw a little bit more of that. You saw a little bit more of the edge, and it was like you saw a lot of bad habits that the cops had, and as the network interfered with it, maybe a little bit of that kind of went out the window, and he sort of tried to at least inject a little bit more of that back into things. And you'll have, some more that'll be covered even in this season, but especially next season. There'll really be without spoiling anything, an exploration of some of the dark side of the cops. I'll just put it that way.
Oh, good. Talking about, and also there was Munch wanting, in a previous episode, quite a while ago, Munch wanting the little NF guy to destroy some evidence, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? So that there's...
Yeah, because they had a videotape of the crime scene that didn't include one of the things that was key to the case.
Max Perlick. Is he still alive, Max Perlick?
As far as I know.
Is he in jail? He's just a naughty boy?
I don't know. I've heard nothing about his life in a long time. So
But we do gather that he's a bit of a naughty boy, if not an
Well,
artisan.
all I know about that is what they said on the DVD commentaries, which was in a particular episode they were talking about what happened to various people.
All right.
Because they were asking Clark Johnson, in fact, because he was part of the commentary, who plays Lewis, like, whether the cast and crew, like, whether people still keep in touch with each other and things like that. And so he kind of rattled off some stuff about what people have gone on to do since then, or other things like that. And when they talked about Brody, then he, said that he got in trouble with the law, like in real life, and that and angered the producers of the show because it made it difficult on them what they were going to do with the character, so they had to like rewrite some stuff and change some things. But anyway, we'll get into that later because that period is, well, it's I guess part of it may have happened already. I don't know, but anyway, there will be some changes at the end of this season, beginning of the next season. So we'll definitely be talking about all that, I'm sure.
Are there any attractive changes?
You might think so. I don't know yet.
Ooh. Well, I know Jerry Ryan doesn't turn up.
Not as far as I know, no.
No. More's the pity. All right. In February, she's 50, and I wouldn't have minded if she'd appeared in this when she was 50. Right. That's been through some time travel involved. Right.
But I don't know if you have more notes that you wanted to.
It's not one of these things before where we've gone through good episodes before, and there's not been much to say. Oh yes, we forgot about Bayliss, didn't we? Bayliss and
that's what I was about to say. Was that what I said to you off the air, but I was saying on the video, is that this storyline of Bayliss taking care of the uncle that molested him was what really convinced me Bayliss being an ISFJ, because the protector role is like so totally what he plays, and it's like I almost can't think of any other type that would actually do that they would have such obvious disdain for this person that had wronged them, but they still took care of them. And I know someone in real life, which I won't get into the details of because I don't want to say people's personal business, but I know a person who is an ISFJ whose mother treated her terribly, and yet she still would help her mother out when she needed it. Her mother was an ESTP and a drug addict, and et cetera, et cetera. And but I couldn't understand, because from my perspective, somebody treats me that way all my life, I'm not going to go out of my way to help them. And it's not because I don't have compassion. It's because that's like that drags my life down. It's like you have toxic people in your life. It makes your own life worse. I don't think that's the same thing as saying you don't have compassion for somebody. And I don't necessarily give up on someone if they were to change their behavior in a way where I could then get along with a person enough to be able to help them. But someone to continue to behave basically the same way repeatedly and expect someone to treat them differently, that's what I couldn't do. And so that's what I would say. So it's both, and I sort of feel an incredulousness at why ISFJs would behave that way, but I also have an admiration for it, because I'm like, that could be like the ultimate, the ultimate form of compassion is like putting all that aside and still taking care of somebody. So, I think, if I remember right, I'm not, trying to start another debate or anything, but I think that Kersey typed Mother Teresa as being in that role. And that would make sense because, basically she was sort of in a position where, whatever hardships or whatever, the bad situation, her attitude was go into the worst people in the worst situation and help them, regardless of what they've done or what they're facing. And so that seems to be the sort of the extreme of the protector role, it's like, it doesn't matter what someone has done. You're still supposed to protect them anyway. You're supposed to take care of them anyway. That's what your role in life is. So.
And in Enneagram terms, that sort of person would be the helper. A strong 2 wing. But I mean, it's just that natural feeling with Bayliss. But also the way he played it, the actor, you could see his conflicted feelings. Like the way he put the food in the fridge.
Yeah, because it's like he starts off from, he gets a phone call from him and he's not going to go there, but then he goes there and then he's just going to drop off the groceries, but then then he's going to cook for him. So it's like, it shows you how he's eaten up by this on both sides of it. Like, he feels anger towards his uncle, pain that his uncle caused him, but he also feels guilt about his condition and that he doesn't want to leave him alone in that condition.
Maybe it's just he feels compassion for this crumbly old man who can't really take care of himself.
Well, right. He feels compassion, but and he feels like he would be guilty about it if he didn't help him.
Right. Right. So a combination of compassion and guilt if he didn't do the right thing. I'm sort of looking at it as he naturally wants to help him because he has compassion for him. Although there's like 2 sides of the same coin: the wanting to help him, and then also the feeling guilty if he didn't help him.
Yeah, because it goes beyond just, like, when I think about compassion, I don't think of it the same way. Like, my version of it is different than Guardian's version. Because it's like Valus feels like an obligation, a duty to help him, and I wouldn't feel that.
Yours is an instinct.
I can feel for somebody, but I still don't feel like I have an obligation to do that. It's not my job. What I choose to do is just me demonstrating compassion, my own choice to help someone. I don't feel like I have to.
Yeah, and Christine, the composer artisan, has said similar things when she does church stuff for helping people. That she wants to do it when she wants to do it, not as an obligation.
And see, that's the thing is, SFJs will do it, maybe more than anybody, but then they'll complain about it too.
Yeah.
In fact, they'll even tell other people, like, they'll get other people to feel sorry for them because they're doing something that they don't really have to do.
Yeah.
Because they'll volunteer for jobs that nobody else will do, and then complain that they had to do that.
Yeah, and then say, I did it even though I've got to take the list out, read out the medical problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Right then. So, oh yeah, nice. I like the fact that they mentioned Bolander, and then the voice that we heard on the phone, maybe like one line, sounded nothing like the real Bolander. And then
although earlier in this season they actually did get Isabella Hoffman to say a few lines over the phone, they did not get Ned Beatty to say a few lines over the phone to Munch. So
no, those few lines might have cost a few $1,000s each. Those words.
Yeah, probably would have been a little bit more for him than for Isabel Hoffman. No disrespect to her, but not quite as big a name in Hollywood circles as Ned Beatty. So.
What was I going to say about one final thought? Yeah, we've got Frank with his laundry, just like cornering a continuing storyline there. Oh yes, there's quite a few examples. When you listen to something like this, folks, with your headphones on, you can tell when they've done ADR, automated dialogue replacement, where they've dubbed in the lines afterwards. Could you tell that, Jeff?
So, are you talking about something specific in this episode?
Yeah, it's like sometimes where they put the sound on, they've had to put the sound on, they've had to re-record the sound. And it's usually coincided with a point which, because I noticed the sound changing, and then it's on, oh, the way they've shot it, it's not within microphone range. So they've had to put the sound on again.
I mean, well, tell me, what specific instance are you talking about?
Oh, there'll be moments where G goes out the room and the camera's away from him, and the sound changes, and it sounds like the sound is not coming from him, that it's actually been put on the recording afterwards. It's just the way that...
So you're not talking about a specific thing from this episode?
No, there are 2 or 3 moments in this episode where I heard it, where the sound was put on. It's just that I can't play those clips for you because the video would be taken down. But I can tell when...
Well, not necessarily, but better safe than sorry.
Yes. So yeah, I can tell when the sound has been dubbed on, because the audio does change when they put the sound on afterwards. Because it's for 2 reasons. One is either there's too much background noise, or because they can't get the microphone in the position, the person with the boom, or put a little mic on them.
I liked the scene though of the in the park where you had the sort of roundabout thing, and then everybody from the different sides.
Yeah,
that I think came together really well.
Yeah, I was going to use that as the thumbnail for this episode, but I'll probably use Mahoney getting shot.
Well, there's certainly plenty of images from both of those that would probably work for. I thought you were going to say you were going to use the woman in bed with Mahoney, but.
No, not her. Not my type. Oh, one thing they could have done differently. Mahoney was in front of a window, and he was shot. I would have rigged something up so that it appeared that the bullet went through him and then through the window. Because there's an exit wound. He was stood in front of the window, but the bullet didn't go through the window.
Stay tuned for future episodes, because there will be some careful examination of the ballistics, the physics of this shooting in the future. So we haven't heard the last of...
Yes, because probably because the way they give the description, the description that they'll give in their reports and stuff won't tally up with the way...
There's a lot of different elements to it.
Yes, such...
will be explored.
Such as Dr. Cox and her relationship with ESTP boy.
Yep. That's just one of them. There's a lot of interesting things to come.
Good. It's a slight pity that Mahoney wasn't smarter and like.
In what way?
Well, in what way is a pity, or that he wasn't smarter?
I mean, like, yeah, because there's any number of scenes you could say that. I mean, you mean in terms of shooting the guy in the park, or what he did after that? I mean, what do you, just in general? Just in general,
I like the idea of, like, if they're up against it, I would like it if the police officers like cut the corners more, try to be a bit more rogue, but then also if Mahoney was a bit smarter and like ahead of them, and maybe even he had a mole inside the office or something. Like a member of the...
You keep saying things that are making me be like, well, just stay tuned.
Oh, member of the clean member, because they leave everything around. A member of the cleaning staff. I mean, they ain't got any security cameras or anything. They can go around looking at their files. I can look on the computer.
Oh, you're killing me. You're killing me, because I could say so much, but I'm not going to.
Right.
I'll just say that, as I said, it is examined from a lot of different angles.
Good.
And
I know
that Homicide really repeatedly hits the theme that nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing happens without witnesses, without, of consequences or effects of something.
Right. So what I can say, folks, is I promised Jeff that I'm going to watch all the rest of these homicides on the half promise that he'll watch the first episode of the Battlestar Galactica remake.
I have half promised that, haven't I?
Yeah, just a half promise. Right. So then, folks.
There was something else, though. Wasn't there something else we talked about watching, too? But now I can't remember what it was. I guess Twilight Zone we had talked about. But
highlights?
Twilight Zone.
No, really. Yes.
I wasn't trying to freeze your brain, Ben. I was just...
Yeah, I think it was just Twilight Zone, and it's just because the characterization is so good in Battlestar Galactica, and like Starbuck is such an ESTP, where it's like, such a good actress. Like those two are the best. Like Katie Sackhoff and Edward James Olmos, who you'll have seen him in many things because he was in Miami Vice. I don't know, Miami Vice is probably one of them things where you either loved it or hated it.
I still to this day have never really watched Miami Vice. Even watching this stuff from the 80s like I have been recently, there's certain things I have not had any inspiration to watch, and that's one of them. Another one that I thought about, I even added to my YouTube queue like I was going to watch it, but I still haven't, is MacGyver, because like I never really got into MacGyver, but I was like, well, I could watch this. Morgan might like it, but every time I have it in my list and other stuff ends up taking my time, I just delete it off there easily. I'm like, it's not a big deal that I didn't watch MacGyver.
I didn't like that because to me it was just too convenient about the way he MacGyvered solutions. It was just too easy.
Well, that's kind of my point, is like, as I look back at this stuff, I can't say that I'm only watching the best stuff, because I'm watching some of it. It's like things I never even saw the first time. Like they were short-lived shows, that ran only for a few weeks before they got canceled, things like that. The Probe shows like that, Probe and Super Carrier, a couple of examples. A sitcom called Eisenhower and Lutz that had like several actors from that show went on to become famous for other things. Scott Bakula, of course, was in Quantum Leap, and then later in Star Trek and other stuff. Patricia Richardson became most famous for being on Home Improvement, playing Tim Allen's wife. And Delane Matthews played Harry Anderson's wife on Dave's World. So there's like several actors from that show that are known for other series later on. But anyway, so getting back to this homicide, was there anything else you wanted to say about it, or we?
No. No, I don't think there was.
Well, then I guess. Okay, then you actually did give a score earlier, but I'll just.
Yeah, I'll give it a 9.
I'll recap for the people, since we're ending the video. Say Ben gave it a 9. I give it a 10. It's probably, I would say, my third favorite episode of the season, with the only two better being the first two episodes of the season, Hostage Part 1 and 2, which I think together, are the best episode of the season. But this one's right up there. I like not only the stuff, all the stuff with Lewis and Kellerman and Mahoney and all that, but also Punchy and Munch. What's a great combination of names there.
Yeah, and I thought Lewis Black was acting properly, not overdoing it.
Yeah, I think that's true about just about everybody. Mr.
Yes, all of the acting was generally good, and there weren't any weak links the way there were in the previous episode amongst the bit parts.
Morris pointed out the Lewis Black giving what would be seen by most people as an understated performance. He wasn't over the top either, so it was very believable. Okay, so you give it a 9, I give it a 10 for an average of 9.5. And join us next week for an episode written by Yaphet Kotto.
Oh,
Narcissus.
Right then. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye-bye.